Yeah, BitTensor is a combination of incentive networks that use an underlying, blockchain to secure the incentive mechanism through the distribution of a cryptocurrency called Tau. So, how this works in practice is there's currently 32 of these subnets that make up the BitTensor network. Each of these subnets have a specific directive or objective that the subnet owners have designed a set of code basically around this incentive mechanism to try and make the interaction between the two parties on the network create value in the direction of their objective. So a good example would be like what I mentioned before with the time series prediction subnet. You have miners on there's 256 slots currently on these subnets. So you have, let's say, 220, 230 miners that are all predicting the price of Bitcoin using a, time series prediction model that they have fine tuned in most cases in order to try and be better than the other miners that are also trying to predict the price of Bitcoin. The way that the network works in practice is that the other 30 or so slots out of the 256 go to validators. That's what I run on the network, is a validator. The validator also runs a set of code that has been designed by the subnet owner, either on a GPU if it needs it, like if it's running an LLM or some other model to power the reward mechanism, or it can also run on CPU if it's limited in the ability or in the needs of like basically horsepower to do this process. And the validator generates the queries then that go out to the mining pool and ask, give me the price of Bitcoin 12, 24, 36, whatever, however many hours from now. The validator then stores that information. And when that timestamp rolls around, the validator will go check the price of Bitcoin against the source of truth, whether it's, the blockchain or Coinbase or the Binance or CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap or wherever we're going to find it, the source of truth from in this case. And then using the incentive mechanism that the subnet owner has designed, the validator scores each of the miners on their ability to predict the price of Bitcoin. That score is then translated into a drip of this cryptocurrency, this token called Tau. And Tau then powers or incentivizes this mechanism of the miners to beat one another to earn the most Tau on their specific subnet. And there's subnets for time series prediction like the one I described. There's also another time series prediction for the S&P 500. Like I said, they go for the numbers first, like that's the easiest way in. Yeah. But then there's also subnets for language. So like chatbot type subnets. There's subnets that scrape data from Reddit and Twitter that miners go out and consolidate and take basically identify different types of data that they want to pull from centralized sources and create open source databases so that other entities in the open source AI landscape can train off of that data. There's subnets for audio translation, image generation, pretty much anything that you can think of in the AI space. There's an equivalent on BitTensor for producing that using decentralized, just like, Bitcoin is the largest supercomputer in the world, and there's miners all over the world doing the Bitcoin mining. Same thing with BitTensor. There's miners on 6 continents or whatever that are doing the BitTensor mining and contributing using either their own hardware in the case of people that have their a good enough internet connection, maybe fiber or something, and access to GPUs. Or in a lot of cases, like I do, I rent all my hardware. So I use services like Vast or RunPod or Vulture or Paperspace, any of these different providers that allow you to use cloud compute. And I use the software then that the subnet owners have created to put onto that compute and participate in this process of decentralizing the distillation of intelligence across these 32 different ecosystems.
That's incredible. It's very complicated. And it is.
Sorry.
For someone who doesn't know this, I'm just saying it out there. If you're the listener and your ears are bleeding, it's okay. If you're wincing and like, what the hell does that mean? I'm going to try to sum this up in a way that's maybe a little less technical. Okay. Okay. We have a decentralized computer, which means little computers all over the world, all networked into
Yes.
one big computer, and they're running different jobs. And in this case,
Yes.
it's all AI jobs. So there's some that are kind of like chat. There are some that are kind of like image generators, some that are now doing like prediction models and everything that AI currently does well. And instead of just getting one output that you have to take, like if Claude or OpenAI gives you an output, you actually have many of these trying to create a competition over the quality of the output and a reward being given for those that have the highest quality output. So I personally think already a user benefit is if I know I'm getting an array of answers, then I get the best answer out of an array of answers. That's better than getting a hallucination from OpenAI with a big disclaimer warning. Hey, this thing might be hallucinating. Like you're talking to someone on acid trying to get some good advice, who's about ready to like just tell you whatever, right? It's kind of like Freud on a mountain of coke telling you about archetypes. It's like, well, that thing might be hallucinating. I don't know. So you have that. And then there's a reward mechanism inside it that creates a token and a value with it. So it's a cryptocurrency, and that's being distributed throughout the platform. And it forms a scenario which I think is really important because it's not one company, even though it has a name BitTensor. We want to be clear, this is not a company, a sole-owned company with shares and owners of those shares, but rather all the ownership is distributed through this token. And so it's very different than like a Microsoft or a Google or OpenAI that's now partnered with Microsoft, et cetera. And what it allows for is a distribution of owning the means of production, owning the means of how these AIs are functioning. And it allows a greater democratization and distribution of importance within this network, including how the network ultimately grows and scales.